keep waiting. You keep telling yourself that one day, somehow, the stars will align, that the mood will hit, that you'll feel that magical surge of motivation. Then you'll move, then you'll act. But that's not how it works. You don't wait to feel ready to get started. You get started to feel ready. That's the lie most people buy into, the idea that change begins when the feelings come. No, change begins when you move in spite of how you feel. I've seen it in my own life. I've watched people with all the potential in the world sit idle because they were waiting for that feeling, that invisible switch, that imaginary moment where everything inside lines up perfectly and suddenly they become the person they've always dreamed of being. But the truth is, that moment never comes for most people because they don't create it. They wait for it, and that's why they stay stuck. I remember listening to a man tell his story of how he used to sleep on the floor of an abandoned building, washing up in a gas station sink every morning before work. And I'll never forget what he said. He didn't wait for motivation to come knock on his door. He had no door. He had no bed. What he had was a vision. He knew he didn't want to live like that anymore. So he showed up day after day. He didn't feel ready. He didn't feel strong. He didn't even believe in himself at the time, but he moved anyway. He worked on his craft while others partied. He walked to libraries when others were watching TV. And slowly, he built something out of the rubble of nothing. That's the thing. You're not supposed to feel good all the time. You're not supposed to feel confident every step of the way. Confidence is not a prerequisite to action. It is a reward. It's something you earn. You earn it by showing up when it's hard. You earn it when you keep your word to yourself. Every time you act in spite of doubt, in spite of fear, you build the kind of foundation success is built on. But most people don't want to do that. They want it to be easy. They want it to feel natural. They want to sit around until the perfect moment arrives, and they never realize the perfect moment doesn't exist. You carve the moment out with your will. You build the momentum with your discipline. You're not tired. You're not unmotivated. You've just believed the wrong story, and it's cost you time, potential, confidence. It's taken years from your life that you'll never get back, because the truth is you could have been so much further ahead by now if you had stopped waiting and started. And I don't say that to make you feel bad. I say it because the clock is still ticking and you still have time. There's a life out there waiting for the real version of you, not the one who waits, not the one who talks, but the one who moves, who acts, who decides that even on the worst days, action is still possible. You don't need permission. You don't need perfect timing. You don't need motivation. You just need to take the first step, and that step has to happen now. You procrastinate not because you're lazy, not because you're broken, but because you've been taught to run from discomfort. Somewhere along the line, you were conditioned to believe that if something doesn't feel good, it isn't right. You were trained to think ease is the goal, that comfort is success. But what if that's the exact reason you stay stuck? What if comfort is the cage and discomfort is the key? See, people don't avoid work. They avoid the feelings that come with the work, the tension, the frustration, the uncertainty, the doubt. You put off the task not because it's hard, but because facing it means facing something inside yourself. That fear that you're not enough. That anxiety that you'll fail, that heavy feeling that maybe, just maybe, you'll give it your best shot and still fall short. So what do? You scroll. You snack. You clean things that don't need cleaning. You distract yourself into numbness, and you call it a break. I've watched someone who came from nothing, born in a low-income neighborhood, labeled as mentally impaired, held back in school, walk into a world that told him he would never be more than his zip code. But he didn't buy that. He didn't escape his situation by chasing comfort. He leaned into the discomfort. He stood up in front of crowds, even when his hands shook. He read books when the words didn't make sense to him the first, second, or third time. He sat with the pain, the struggle, and the grind because he knew the other side of discomfort is freedom. He made it not because he was fearless, but because he was willing to feel the fear and move anyway. You procrastinate because you've made an enemy out of resistance. Every time you feel tension rise, you treat it like a stop sign, but it's not a stop sign. It's a signal. It's the body's way of saying you're stepping into something meaningful. Discomfort is the weight room for your mind. You don't get stronger by avoiding it. You get stronger by shaking up, shaking if you must, but showing up anyway. The mistake people make is waiting until it feels easy, but that day never comes. The people who move mountains don't wait for ease. They train themselves to walk with the weight. They get comfortable being uncomfortable. That's what separates them. Not talent, not genius, just grit. Just the decision to stop negotiating with pain and start learning from it. You've got to retrain your brain to see discomfort not as a threat, but as a teacher. Every difficult task you avoid is trying to teach you something about yourself, and every time you run from it, you miss the lesson. And worse, you stay exactly where you are. So the next time you feel like putting it off, ask yourself, what am I really trying to avoid? Is it the work, or is it the emotions tied to it? Then do it anyway. That's how you take your power back. That's how you stop letting fear run your schedule. Perfectionism is one of the most dangerous forms of procrastination because it disguises itself as ambition. It whispers in your ear that you're just trying to do it right, that you're only waiting until everything is perfect, all the details aligned, every doubt cleared. But in truth, it's fear wearing a mask. It's the fear of not being good enough, the fear of trying and coming up short. So you plan and you overthink and you tweak things that don't need tweaking. You obsess over getting it right, and in doing so, you delay getting it done. What people don't realize is that perfectionism is rooted in insecurity. It says, if it's not perfect, I'll be exposed. It says, if I give it my all and still fail, then what does that say about me? So instead of risking that kind of pain, you keep it in your head, you dream about it, talk about it, prepare for it, but you don't execute. Because as long as it lives in your imagination, it can't be criticized. It can't be rejected. It can't fall apart. You'd rather sabotage yourself quietly than face the idea that your best might not be enough. I knew a man who used to rewrite his speeches over and over again, sometimes hundreds of times. He'd write a powerful line and then doubt it the next day. He kept editing until the life was drained out of the message. You know why? Because he was terrified, not of failure, but of exposure, of standing on a stage and having his voice crack, of someone in the crowd laughing or walking out. So he convinced himself he just needed more time, more polish, more preparation. But preparation became paralysis, and one day he looked up and realized the opportunities had passed him by, and the pain of regret was heavier than the fear had ever been. Perfectionism doesn't protect you, it traps you. It convinces you to wait until you feel bulletproof, but no one ever is. No plan is perfect. No first step is flawless. You're going to mess up. You're going to miss a few notes. You're going to fall on your face at times. That's part of it. The people who rise, who truly rise, are not the ones who wait until they're ready. They're the ones who start before they feel ready and refine as they go. You've got to let go of the fantasy that one day you'll do it all just right, because the cost of perfectionism is not just missed opportunities, it's missed growth. It's the version of you that never got built because you were too scared to start building. Every delay becomes a wall. Every excuse becomes a brick. And before long, you've built a prison out of your potential. So instead of asking, is this perfect? Start asking, is this enough to move forward? Start where you are. Use what you have. Let the mistakes come and let the world see you imperfect, raw, and real, because that's where the breakthroughs happen. Not in flawless execution, but in courageous imperfection. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be honest, focused, and willing to begin. That's how you break the chains. There's a reason you keep putting things off, and it runs deeper than laziness or distraction. It's because over time, you've built an identity around procrastination. It's not just something you do anymore, it's who you think you are. And strangely enough, it becomes comfortable. It becomes the excuse you lean on when things get difficult, when you don't follow through, when the days slip away and you don't know where they went. You tell yourself, that's just how I am. I've always been this way. But that's not true. That's just a story you've repeated so many times you've forgotten it's not a fact. Because if you actually stopped procrastinating, if you really gave it your all, there'd be no one else to blame. That's what scares you the most. The idea that if you stepped up and failed, the failure would fall squarely on your shoulder. Not on a lack of time, not on the distractions, not on being too busy, but on you. So to protect yourself, you don't even try fully. You put things off. You half try. You make excuses. Because that way you can always say, I didn't really give it my best, and deep down you think that protects you. But what it really does is destroy your potential, one day at a time. I knew someone who spent years of his life running from responsibility. He came from a background where no one expected anything from him. In school, he was placed in the slow classes. People labeled him, dismissed him, ignored him. And eventually, he started doing the same thing to himself. He told himself he wasn't smart enough, that he couldn't do what others were doing, that there was no point in trying because the outcome was already written. So he drifted. He procrastinated everything. Goals, dreams, growth, but deep down he was aching for more. One day he realized something. It wasn't his ability holding him back. It was his identity. He'd been living out a false story, and it was costing him his future. That's what you've got to confront. Who are you without the excuses, without the distractions, without the label of a procrastinator? Because stepping into that version of yourself means leaving behind every lie that gave you comfort. That's not easy. It's painful, but it's necessary. The truth is, procrastination isn't just a bad habit. It's a hiding place. It's a way to avoid pressure, avoid risk, avoid the weight of responsibility. And the longer you live in that space, the more disconnected you become from what you're really capable of. You start to shrink, you start to doubt, and one day you look in the mirror and don't even recognize who you've become. But you can rewrite the story. You can decide today that you are not a prisoner of your past behavior. You can take that first uncomfortable step toward discipline, consistency, and ownership. And every time you act, even in a small way, you chip away at the old identity and build a new one, stronger, bolder, more aligned with who you're meant to be. This isn't just about productivity. This is about who you choose to become. You said, You think you're short on time, but you're really starving for meaning. That's the quiet truth behind most of your procrastination. It's not just that you're lazy or that you don't care. It's that your life has been hijacked by distractions that flood your brain with momentary relief while slowly robbing you of direction. You get that hit of dopamine every time you scroll, swipe, click, or escape, and it feels good for a second, but what you don't see is what it's costing you over time. Your brain isn't wired for 20 tabs open and 10 notifications blinking. It's not designed to process an endless stream of empty stimulation. But that's exactly what most people are feeding it. They wonder why they can't focus, why they don't feel inspired, why they don't follow through. But it's no mystery. And you've trained your mind to crave the cheap high instead of long-term fulfillment. You've conditioned yourself to chase quick reward instead of deep purpose. I knew someone who used to struggle just to sit in silence. If it got quiet, he'd reach for his phone. If he felt uncomfortable, he'd open YouTube or scroll social media. He wasn't lazy, he was just overwhelmed by too much stimulation and too little direction. It took hitting rock bottom to wake him up. He'd wasted years chasing digital distractions, always promising himself he'd get to the important things later. But later never came, because when your habits are wired for escape, later becomes never. He started changing things slowly. He removed the apps that were eating his attention. He began each day with 10 minutes of stillness, 10 minutes of reconnecting with the thoughts he'd been running from. And you know what happened? The clarity returned. He started remembering what he wanted. He started caring again, not because he forced himself to, but because he finally made space for it. Procrastination is not just a time issue, it's a clarity issue. You keep postponing your priorities because you've buried them under noise. You've dulled your drive with distraction. And if you want to take it back, it won't be easy. You'll have to detox your habits. You'll have to sit in silence. You'll have to feel the discomfort you've been avoiding. But it's worth it, because that's where meaning lives. On the other side of your excuses, your impulses, your quick fixes. You can't build a meaningful life one dopamine hit at a time. You need space. You need stillness. You need to be willing to sit with your goals long enough to feel them again, not as ideas, but as fires in your chest, the kind of fire that can't be replaced by a video or a notification or a like. Start small. Cut one distraction. Keep one promise to yourself. Focus deeply on one thing without splitting your attention. You'll feel the shift. Your mind will fight it at first, like any addict in withdrawal. But with time, the noise will fade. The clarity will return. And you'll remember who you were before procrastination became your routine. You don't need more time. You need less noise. You keep telling yourself you'll start tomorrow, that you just need a little more time, a little more energy, a little more inspiration. But what you don't realize is that your problem isn't time, it's belief. Deep down, you don't really believe your actions matter. You don't believe you're capable of changing things. So you stall, you delay. You make plans you never act on, not because you don't want to succeed, but because somewhere inside you, you don't think you deserve to. When you've lived through rejection, through pain, through failure that cuts deep, it changes the way you see yourself. You start to internalize it. You stop trusting your instincts. You stop believing you have what it takes. You say things like, "What's the point?" Or even if I try, I'll probably mess it up anyway. That kind of thinking becomes the seed of procrastination, because if you don't believe your effort makes a difference, why bother? I remember a man who was told he'd never amount to anything over and over again. He was laughed at, pushed aside, told to give up. He carried that voice in his head for years, and every time he sat down to work on something meaningful, that voice would creep in. Who do you think you are? So he'd walk away, not because he was lazy, but because he was scared, because no one had ever told him he could win. He had to learn how to believe again. And that belief didn't come overnight. It came through small actions, day after day, stacking evidence that he was capable. That's how you rebuild confidence, not through pep talks, not through waiting for someone to come save you. You rebuild it by showing up when it's hard, by choosing discipline over doubt, by proving to yourself one uncomfortable action at a time that you do have what it takes. You have to stop seeing procrastination as a time management issue and start seeing it for what it really is, a belief problem. You're not stuck because you lack tools. You're stuck because you've let your inner voice become your enemy. You've talked yourself out of your own power. And the only way to get it back is to act, to move, even when the belief isn't there yet. Because belief isn't something you wait for, it's something you build. You don't fix procrastination by thinking harder. You fix it by proving yourself wrong. You show up even when your hands are shaking. You make the call, write the page, go to the gym, start the project. And with every small win, every moment of progress, you start to silence that old voice. You start to remember the truth. You were never broken. You were just buried beneath layers of doubt and disappointment. So the next time you want to put it off again, remember, it's not about the task. It's about who you're becoming. You either feed the belief or you feed the fear, but you don't get to do both. Choose belief. Choose movement. Choose to reclaim the time you've been giving away to doubt, because the clock's still ticking and your future is waiting.